John Miller stood at the window of his small apartment, looking out at the rebuilt Seattle skyline. 5 years after first contact, Earth was still adjusting to the reality of not being alone in the universe. The morning rain tapped gently against the glass as he sipped his coffee, thinking about the message he had received the night before. The call from the United Earth government had been unexpected. At 62, with gray hair and the weathered face of a man who had seen too much, Miller thought his days of service were behind him. 30 years in the Navy, reaching the rank of admiral, followed by a decade in diplomacy, he had earned his quiet retirement. His communication device buzzed again. The president was waiting. An hour later, Miller sat across from President Susan Clark in the Oval Office. She was a sharp woman with practical short hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Admiral Miller, we need you to represent us at the Galactic Council," she said without preamble. Miller raised an eyebrow. "Madam President, we've had 3 ambassadors in 5 years. None have made progress. Exactly why we need you." The president pushed a folder across the desk. "The aliens see us as children. They pat us on the head while they take what they want." Miller opened the folder. Inside were reports from the outer colonies, unfair trade deals, territorial violations, and resource theft that Earth's previous ambassadors had been unable to address. "The Elonians found us and brought us into the galactic community," Clark continued. "But they and the other council races have kept us dependent. We get their outdated technology while they take our resources. We're being squeezed, John." Miller nodded slowly. The reports matched what he'd suspected. "Why me?" "Because you understand both war and peace. 3 diplomats have failed. Maybe they need to hear from someone who knows what happens when diplomacy fails." Miller stood and walked to the window, looking out at Washington, D.C. When he turned back, his face was set with determination. "I'll need a team. My people." President Clark nodded. "Already arranged. Lisa Gordon for linguistics, Alan Wright for strategy, Diane Hughes for xenobiology. The horizon. Being prepared as we speak. You leave in 3 days." As Miller turned to leave, the president called him back. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a small metal case containing a data chip. "This contains information and authorizations not in your official briefing," she said quietly. "Use it only when all diplomatic options have been exhausted." Miller took the case, feeling its weight in his palm. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Hope for the best, plan for the worst." The president's eyes were hard. "Humanity won't be pushed around forever, John." 3 days later, Miller walked up the boarding ramp of the UES Horizon. The sleek diplomatic vessel was Earth's newest ship, though by council standards, it was primitive. Captain Patricia Wells greeted him at the airlock. "Admiral, it's an honor to have you aboard," she said, saluting crisply. "It's Ambassador now, Captain. The Admiral retired years ago." Wells smiled. "Once an admiral, always an admiral to those who served under you, sir." Miller nodded and moved through the ship to his quarters. Lisa Gordon was already there, arranging translation devices. "Ambassador," she said with a warm smile, "ready to teach some aliens about human determination." "Let's hope they're quick learners," Miller replied, setting down his bags. Through the viewport, he could see Earth growing smaller as the horizon prepared for departure. The data chip from President Clark was secure in his inner pocket. He hoped he wouldn't need it. But as Earth vanished from view and the horizon accelerated toward the stars, he couldn't shake the feeling that this mission would end very differently than anyone expected. The journey to Nexus Station would take 3 weeks. 3 weeks to prepare for what might be humanity's last chance at diplomatic equality, or the first step towards something far more drastic. The UES Horizon moved through the darkness of space, its engines humming steadily. Inside the ship's main conference room, John Miller studied the holographic display with his team. The blue light from the projection cast shadows across their focused faces. "These reports are troubling," said Alan Wright, pointing to a cluster of red dots near the edge of human space. A former Marine colonel with short cropped hair, Wright had a talent for seeing patterns others missed. Alien ships entering our territory have increased by 60% in the last month alone. Diane Hughes nodded, her fingers moving quickly across her datapad. As one of Earth's top xenobiologists, she understood alien behavior better than most humans. The Valkorians are the worst offenders. 3 mining colonies have reported their ships taking samples without permission. Samples? Miller asked. Plants, animals, soil, and possibly people. Hughes looked up, her expression grim. 7 colonists from the Europa settlement disappeared last month during a Valkorian scientific visit. Miller's jaw tightened. This information hadn't been in his official briefing. Lisa Gordon, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. Their language contains no word for equal, only superior and inferior. When they speak to us, they use linguistic markers reserved for speaking to children or pets. Perfect, Miller muttered. The ship's intercom buzzed. Ambassador, came Captain Wells' voice. Could you join me on the bridge? When Miller arrived, Wells was studying a sensor display. We're being followed, she said without looking up. 2 Valkorian vessels. They're staying just outside hailing range. Are they a threat? Not directly, but they're scanning us constantly. My security chief thinks they're testing our capabilities. Miller looked at the screen showing the distant ships. How long until we reach Nexus Station? 16 days, Wells replied. But there's something else you should see. She led Miller to a small, secure room adjacent to the bridge. Inside was a communication setup unlike anything on the rest of the ship. This isn't standard equipment, Miller observed. No, sir. It was installed yesterday under direct orders from Earth Command. Wells touched a panel, and a hidden compartment opened, revealing advanced technology. This is a quantum communication array. It bypasses the Council's monitored channels. They're listening to our communications. All of them. This is the only secure way to contact Earth without the Council knowing. Miller understood now why President Clark had seemed so concerned. Humanity wasn't just being treated unfairly, they were being actively contained. Over the next 2 weeks, Miller and his team prepared constantly. They studied Council protocols, alien psychology, and the history of other species' introductions to the galactic community. One evening, while everyone else slept, Miller found Captain Wells in the ship's observation lounge, staring at the stars. "Trouble sleeping, Captain?" he asked. "Always before a battle," she replied. "This is a diplomatic mission." Wells smiled without humor. "Is it? I've been transporting diplomats for 3 years. None came with a hidden quantum communicator and a special forces officer disguised as a strategy expert." Miller didn't deny it. Wright's background is classified. Nothing stays classified on a ship this size. Wells turned to face him. "The crew deserves to know what we're heading into. We're heading into a diplomatic meeting. With a war contingency." She nodded toward his chest, where the data chip from President Clark was hidden in an inner pocket. "Whatever's on that chip, it's not a peace offering." Miller considered his words carefully. The Council races have been exploiting Earth while pretending to help us. If they won't listen to reason, we need options. Options that Wright can provide. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. As they spoke, the ship's view screen showed their first glimpse of Nexus Station, a massive ring structure surrounding an artificial sun. Even from this distance, thousands of ships could be seen moving around it like busy insects. "It's beautiful," Wells said quietly. "Yes," Miller agreed. "Let's hope it's not the last beautiful thing we see." The UES Horizon approached the station, a tiny human vessel among giants. Miller couldn't help feeling that they were entering the lion's den, and the lions were very, very hungry. The human delegation's quarters on Nexus Station were small and located in the station's outer ring, far from the council chambers and diplomatic offices. The walls were thin, the air recyclers noisy, and the artificial gravity fluctuated unpredictably. "They've put us in the alien equivalent of a basement apartment," Lisa Gordon remarked as she unpacked her translation equipment. Miller nodded, looking out the single viewport at the distant curve of the station. It's a message. We're not important enough for better accommodations. Their first scheduled appearance before the council was postponed 3 times in the first week. Each time, a different alien official apologized with elaborate politeness that barely masked their contempt. It's deliberate, Alan Wright said during their morning briefing. They're establishing dominance by making us wait. Miller agreed but saw an opportunity. While they ignore us, we'll build our own connections. Over the next few days, Miller and his team ventured into areas of the station where newer species gathered. In a marketplace designed for multiple atmospheres and gravity preferences, they met representatives from races who had joined the galactic community in the past century. The insectoid Celtos, with their gleaming exoskeletons and multiple limbs, shared similar complaints about trade restrictions. The Meridians, aquatic beings who moved through water-filled environmental suits, revealed that they too were denied access to certain technologies. The crystalline Phosians, who communicated through light patterns, had been fighting for decades to gain mining rights in their own home system. Diane Hughes quickly adapted her universal translator to handle these new languages. These species all face the same barriers Earth does, she reported. It's systematic. Miller invited representatives from these marginalized species to informal meetings in the human quarters. What the space lacked in luxury, they made up for with something uniquely human: coffee and homemade cookies that Hughes had somehow managed to bake in their limited kitchen. Earth food, Miller explained as he passed out cups and plates. Sharing food is a human tradition when making new friends. This simple gesture, offering hospitality despite their limited resources, resonated deeply with the other species. In their own cultures, such sharing held similar importance. "The council races never invite us to eat," said Katik, a Celtos diplomat, clicking her mandibles appreciatively. "They say our eating habits are primitive." Miller smiled. "On Earth, we have thousands of different cultures. We've learned that different doesn't mean primitive." These quiet meetings continued, growing larger each time as word spread. Miller was building a coalition of the overlooked, species who, individually, held little power but together represented a significant bloc. Not everyone appreciated these efforts. On the 10th day, High Chancellor Zorthax of the Valkorians confronted Miller in a public corridor. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, with scaled skin and eyes that glowed amber, the Valkorian was an intimidating figure. "Ambassador Miller," Zorthax said, his translator barely softening his harsh voice. "How curious to find humans consorting with such undeveloped species." Miller stood his ground. "We find value in diverse perspectives, Chancellor." Zorthax laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Cosmic infants playing at diplomacy. You understand nothing of galactic politics. Perhaps we understand more than you think." The Valkorian leaned closer. "Your speaking slot before the council has been rescheduled again. Perhaps in another month, if there are no further complications." After Zorthax departed, Lisa Gordon emerged from a nearby doorway. "That was interesting. He came looking for you specifically." "We've got their attention," Miller said. "Is that good?" "It means they're worried." Miller watched the retreating figure of the Valkorian. "They expected us to sit quietly and wait our turn. Instead, we're building alliances." That evening, a message arrived from an unexpected source. Ven Shar, an Alonian counselor who had been present when Earth was first contacted. The message was brief. "Meet me in the Gardens of Reflection. Alone. There are truths you should know." Miller fingered the data chip in his pocket, still unused. Perhaps he wouldn't need it after all, or perhaps he would need it sooner than expected. Either way, the game was changing. The Gardens of Reflection were located in a quiet part of Nexus Station. Artificial light mimicked sunset, casting long shadows across plants from 100 worlds. Miller walked alone among strange flowers and trees, his footsteps soft on the mossy path. "Ambassador Miller." The voice came from behind a large blue-leafed tree. "Thank you for coming." Counselor Venishar stepped into view. The Elonian was tall and slender with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. As one of the first aliens to contact Earth, Venishar was well known to humans. "You said there were truths I should know," Miller said directly. Venishar nodded and gestured to a bench hidden among exotic plants. "What I tell you puts us both in danger. The Council has rules about sharing certain information with newer species." They sat, and Venishar spoke in a low voice. "Earth was not discovered by accident 5 years ago. We have been watching your planet for decades." Miller felt a chill despite the garden's warm air. "Watching us? Why?" "It is called the Ascension Protocol. The Council identifies promising species and monitors their development. When the time is right, contact is made." "What determines the right time?" Venishar's expression showed something like shame. "When the species has advanced enough to be useful, but not enough to be a threat." Miller processed this information carefully. "And humans reached that point 5 years ago." "Actually, no. Contact with Earth came earlier than some Council members wanted. Your technological progress was accelerating too quickly. Some feared that within another decade, humans would develop interstellar travel independently. And that would be bad because species who find their own way to the stars are harder to control." Venishar looked around nervously. "The Ascension Protocol is designed to keep newer species dependent on Council technology and guidance for at least a century." Meanwhile, across the station, Diane Hughes had discovered something important. Given access to the public archives to study alien biology, she had stumbled upon restricted files accidentally left accessible. "Look at this," she told Lisa Gordon, pointing to her screen. "Resource allocation reports going back centuries. Every time a new species joins the galactic community, the same pattern appears." Gordon leaned closer. "Their resource exports increase while technology imports are strictly controlled. It's systematic exploitation," Hughes said. "They're treating every new species like a colony, not an equal." Back in the Gardens of Reflection, Venishar confirmed Miller's growing suspicions. "The Valkorians and 3 other elder species control the Council," the Elonian explained. "They present themselves as mentors, but they are more like, I believe the human word is parasites." "Why are you telling me this?" Miller asked. "Because humans are different. Your adaptability, your creativity, it frightens the elder species. They want to contain you, but I have studied your history. Humans do not stay contained for long." "No," Miller agreed. "We don't." When Miller returned to the human quarters, he found his team waiting with their own discoveries. As they shared information, a complete picture emerged, one far worse than any of them had imagined. "They've been watching us for decades," Miller told them, "possibly interfering with our development." Hughes nodded. "And once they made contact, they'd been ensuring we remain dependent while taking what they want from Earth and our colonies." Wright's expression darkened. "The missing colonists from Europa. I'm betting they weren't the first humans to disappear." Miller felt the weight of the data chip in his pocket. President Clark had known, or at least suspected, much of this already. That's why she had chosen him, a military man with diplomatic experience, rather than just another diplomat. "We need to speak to the Council," Miller said firmly. "Not in a month, not in a week. Now." "They'll just delay us again," Gordon pointed out. Miller's eyes hardened. "Then we'll have to give them a reason to listen." As night fell over Nexus Station, Miller sent a message to all the representatives of newer species he had met. It was time to show the Galactic Council that humans, and their new allies, would not be ignored any longer. Miller's coalition of newer species grew stronger each day. 23 representatives now attended their meetings, sharing information and planning joint proposals to the Council. For the first time in decades, the marginalized species were finding their voice. The Valkorians noticed. Miller frequently spotted their observers watching him, following at a distance. Security scans of the human quarters increased, though they found nothing suspicious. "We're making them nervous," Wright said with satisfaction during their morning briefing. Good, Miller replied. Nervous opponents make mistakes. The quantum communicator in their secure room activated that afternoon. An emergency signal from Earth. Captain Wells brought Miller immediately. Ambassador. President Clark's image flickered with the long-distance transmission. There's been an attack. Miller felt his heart sink as the president described what had happened. The human settlement on Europa, Jupiter's moon, had been hit by Valkorian ships. They claimed they were removing illegal settlements from their historical territory. Nearly 7,000 colonists were dead. The survivors? Miller asked, his voice tight. Evacuated to Mars. The Valkorians withdrew after destroying the colony's main dome. When the transmission ended, Miller stood in silence for a long moment. Wells waited, watching his face carefully. Send a message to my contacts, he finally said. I need to meet with them immediately. Within hours, representatives from all 23 allied species were squeezed into the human quarters. Miller described the attack without emotion, letting the facts speak for themselves. This cannot stand, said Kotick of the Xeltos, mandibles clicking angrily. If they claim human territory today, they will claim ours tomorrow. Others agreed, voices rising in multiple languages as the translators struggled to keep up. Miller raised his hand for silence. I'm requesting an emergency council session. According to Section 12 of the Membership Charter, attacks on member species must be addressed within one standard day. They will deny your request, said a Meridian representative, water bubbling in his environmental suit. They always find ways around their own rules. Not this time, Miller said firmly, because all of you will submit the same request. They can ignore one voice, but not 24. The strategy worked. The Council could not ignore the unified demand from so many species without openly violating their charter. A session was scheduled for the following day. Miller was preparing his address when another emergency transmission arrived from Earth. This time, it was not good news. The Earth government is going to accept a compromise, Miller told his team afterward, his voice heavy. Abandonment of all outer Sol system colonies in exchange for formal recognition of Earth's sovereignty over inner system territories. That's surrender, Wright said in disbelief. It's fear, Miller corrected. 7,000 dead has shaken them. What are your orders? Lisa Gordon asked. Miller looked at each of them in turn. President Clark has ordered me to accept the terms. The room fell silent. They all understood what such terms meant. Earth would be permanently confined to a handful of planets and moons, with no possibility of meaningful expansion. Humanity would remain a minor, contained species forever. Will you follow those orders? Hughes finally asked. Miller reached into his pocket and removed the data chip President Clark had given him before they left Earth. He turned it slowly in his fingers, considering its weight and what it represented. The President also gave me this, he said quietly, with instructions to use it when all diplomatic options were exhausted. He inserted the chip into a reader. The screen filled with information, contingency plans, resource allocations, ship movements, and communication protocols that none of them had been briefed on. My God, Wright whispered as he read over Miller's shoulder. Earth has been preparing for this possibility from the beginning. Miller nodded, a new determination showing in his face. Contact our allies. Tell them I'm going to address the Council tomorrow, but not with the message the Valkorians are expecting. As Nexus Station's artificial night cycle began, Miller drafted a speech that would change the course of human history, and perhaps galactic history as well. The Grand Council chamber was the heart of Nexus Station, a vast circular room with 500 seats arranged in rising tiers. It could accommodate representatives from every member species. Today, for the first time in decades, it was filled to capacity. News of the Valkorian attack on Europa had spread quickly. Species that normally ignored council proceedings had sent observers. Everyone wanted to see how the humans would respond to this crisis. Miller stood with his team at the entrance. They had spent the night reviewing the contents of the data chip and preparing for what would come next. "Are you sure about this?" Lisa Gordon asked quietly. "Once we cross this line, there's no going back." Miller nodded. "Earth crossed that line when they sent me with this chip. They just didn't expect to use it so soon." The chamber doors opened, and the human delegation walked toward the central speaking platform. High Chancellor Zorthax of the Valkorians watched from the highest tier, his amber eyes narrowed. Other council elders whispered among themselves, already certain of the outcome. They expected apologies, acceptance of terms, perhaps some minor concessions to save human pride. They were wrong. Miller took his place on the platform. The room quieted as he was formally recognized by the council speaker. "Ambassador Miller of Earth," the speaker announced, "you have requested this emergency session to address the unfortunate incident at your Europa settlement. You may proceed." Miller looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of the 23 allied species representatives scattered throughout the audience. Each gave a subtle nod. "Thank you, Speaker," Miller began. "I come before this council not to discuss an unfortunate incident, but to address a deliberate attack that killed 7,000 human colonists." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. This was not the conciliatory tone they had expected. For 5 years, humanity has attempted to join the galactic community as equals. For 5 years, we have been denied fair trade, territorial rights, and access to technologies freely shared among elder species. High Chancellor Zorthax leaned forward. "Speaker, the human is not addressing the matter at hand." The speaker nodded. "Ambassador Miller, please limit your remarks to the Europa situation." "The Europa attack is not an isolated incident," Miller continued, ignoring the interruption. "It is the culmination of a systematic policy of exploitation that affects not just humans, but dozens of newer species." He pressed a button on his wrist device. Around the chamber, screens lit up showing the documents Diane Hughes had discovered, evidence of the Ascension Protocol and its impact on new member species. For centuries, this council has presented itself as a guiding force for galactic civilization, while secretly ensuring that newer species remain dependent and weak. The chamber erupted in shouts. The speaker pounded for order as council security moved toward Miller. "Ambassador, you will cease this display immediately or be removed." Miller raised his voice above the chaos. "On behalf of Earth and humanity, I must inform this council that it is time for war." The room fell suddenly silent, every alien eye fixed on the human. "Not a war of conquest," Miller continued into the stunned silence, "but a war against injustice and exploitation that has been the council's true policy for millennia." He activated another display. This one showed ships, hundreds of human vessels that had never been reported to the council registry. For 3 years, Earth has been building a fleet and establishing bases beyond council monitoring. We have developed technologies the council forbade. We have prepared for this day, hoping it would never come. High Chancellor Zorthax was on his feet now. "This is treason against the council. Security, remove this human immediately." Miller spoke quickly as security approached. "I am not alone in this declaration. Today, I announce the formation of the Sovereignty Coalition, an alliance of 37 species who reject council authority and pledge mutual defense." On cue, representatives from Miller's allied species stood, joined by 14 others who had secretly agreed to support them. As security reached the platform, Miller finished his declaration. "The era of exploitation ends today. The Coalition offers protection to any species wishing to join us. The choice is yours: continue under council dominance or stand with us as equals." They led him away then, but Miller knew it didn't matter. The words had been spoken. The data shared, the challenge made. The galaxy would never be the same. The days following Miller's declaration were chaos. Security forces had taken the human delegation to containment cells, but they didn't stay there long. Representatives from the Xeltos and Meridians, claiming diplomatic privilege, demanded their release into protective custody. Across Nexus Station, species chose sides. The council chambers remained in constant emergency session as the elder races struggled to maintain control. Ships from all corners of the galaxy arrived hourly, some pledging support to the coalition, others answering the council's call for unity. In a quiet conference room, under Xelto's protection, Miller met with the growing coalition leadership. "The Valkorians have dispatched a war fleet toward Earth," Galactic informed him, her mandibles clicking with concern. 40 battleships. They mean to crush human resistance quickly as a warning to others. Miller nodded calmly. Exactly as we expected. He activated a communication device provided by their allies. The quantum link connected directly to Earth's Defense Command. General Harris appeared on screen. "Status report," Miller requested. "The Valkorian fleet entered the outer Sol system an hour ago," Harris replied. "They found our welcome party waiting." The general shared tactical displays showing the Valkorian warships surrounded by over 100 human vessels that had emerged from hidden bases in the asteroid belt and the moons of the outer planets. More surprisingly, ships from other coalition species had already arrived to support Earth's defense. "High Chancellor Zorthax is demanding our surrender," Harris continued, a slight smile on his face. "I told him to look out his viewport." Miller allowed himself a small smile. "And the Valkorian fleet is withdrawing. They weren't prepared to fight a battle they might lose." On the third day, President Clark addressed the galactic community via faster-than-light broadcast. Her message was clear. Humanity did not seek war or dominance, but would no longer accept second-class status. "For centuries, the Council has preached cooperation while practicing control," she said. "The Coalition offers a new path, one where all species stand as equals, sharing knowledge and resources fairly." She revealed what the data chip had contained, not just military contingencies, but scientific breakthroughs. Earth scientists had developed innovations in propulsion and energy generation that they would freely share with all Coalition members. "What the Council hoarded, we will share," she promised. "What they rationed, we will make abundant." By the fifth day, 37 Coalition species had grown to 52. The Council's authority weakened hour by hour as more races demanded reforms or threatened to leave. On the seventh day, Miller stood at a viewport in the Xelto's diplomatic section, looking out at Nexus Station's artificial ring system. The view was partially obscured by hundreds of ships from Coalition species gathering in a show of solidarity. Lisa Gordon joined him. "Not quite what Earth expected when they sent us, is it?" "No," Miller agreed. "They thought we'd need months to build alliances, years to challenge the Council. They didn't count on the Valkorians forcing our hand." "It wasn't really time for war, was it?" Gordon asked. "More like time for revolution." Miller smiled. "War gets attention. Revolution creates change. Do you think they'll attack Earth again?" "Not directly. The balance of power has shifted too much already." As they watched, more ships arrived. Mid-tier species that had previously remained neutral were now declaring for the Coalition. The Council races were losing their grip on galactic power with each passing hour. "You know what the greatest human strength turned out to be," Miller said quietly. "Not our ships or our technology." "What then?" "Our ability to build alliances, to inspire others to stand together against oppression." He gestured to the gathering fleet. "No species can stand alone against the Council, but together." Gordon nodded. "Together, we've changed the galaxy." Miller touched the window, his finger tracing the outline of a distant Earth ship. "This is just the beginning. The real work starts now, building a better system than the one we're replacing." Outside, the ships continued to gather, their lights blinking like stars against the darkness. After 10,000 years of Council dominance, the galaxy was transforming. And humanity, the newest player on the cosmic stage, had helped light the spark.